In the middle of the clay court season, and we're currently in Madrid, but the French Open entry list has actually come out for the men and the women. Let's go have a look at the ladies' entry list, though, because there are some big names that are actually having to play qualifying unless they get a wild card.
Well, that wasn't easy. I think handling the emotions, the tension, the nerves of first round, it's never easy, and especially when I played her a couple of months ago and I lost, so I was really looking forward for the revenge.
There's a moment in every sport where the rulebook and the reality stop agreeing with each other, and the people in charge have to decide which one they're actually loyal to. Tennis had that moment this year, and it didn't come with a dramatic press conference or a thunderclap announcement. It came quietly, on a draw sheet, when two names landed exactly where they weren't supposed to be. Paula Badosa, a former top 4 player in the world, a woman who had clawed her way back from a career-threatening injury with the kind of grit most people will never understand, found herself on the outside looking in at Roland Garros. And Alex, a 20-year-old from the Philippines who had barely scratched the surface of what a full tour season even demands, walked straight into the main draw without ever touching the qualifying rounds. No brutal 3-match gauntlet. No white-knuckle survival tennis in front of empty practice courts. Direct entry. Just like that. And the moment that news landed, tennis collectively stopped and stared, because this was not how things were supposed to go. Not this fast, not this way, and yet here we are. And the story behind how it happened is genuinely one of the most fascinating things this sport has produced in years. To really understand it, you have to go back to Melbourne, because that's where this whole thing started taking shape. Alex wasn't a headliner at the Australian Open. She had no seed, no expectations of a deep run, no real reason for casual fans to be paying attention. But something kept happening around her matches that was impossible to ignore. Courts that should have had a few hundred wandering spectators were packed beyond capacity. People pressed against fences outside, craning for any angle they could get. The Filipino community in Melbourne showed up like it was a home tournament, not a grand slam happening on the other side of the planet, and in tennis, that kind of energy travels fast. Tournament directors notice it. Broadcasters absolutely notice it. Sponsors, the people who keep the lights on at these events, were paying very close attention, because tennis, for all its clay and tradition and tiebreak drama, is also a business. And Alex had quietly become very good for business. Then came Indian Wells, then Austin, where she made a semi-final and showed something that matters far more than raw talent ever could. She showed she could suffer. 4 matches back-to-back, no real recovery days, her body pushed past what most players her age have ever experienced, and she kept competing, kept finding answers when the comfortable options ran out. She said herself that she needed to go through those situations to understand what it actually feels like to play deep into a tournament without the luxury of rest. That's not someone happy just to be at the table. That's someone building something with a very specific destination in mind. By the time Miami arrived, the conversation had genuinely shifted. She wasn't the promising young player people were watching from a careful distance anymore. She was becoming a problem. Her shot selection got cleaner. Her movement improved. The way she constructed points started showing a tactical intelligence that usually takes years of tour experience to even begin developing, and analysts who had been measured and cautious in their praise started speaking with a different kind of certainty. The hedging dropped away. The qualifiers disappeared. She wasn't just promising anymore. She was dangerous. And that's exactly when Paula Badosa enters the picture, because this is where the story gets genuinely complicated. Badosa is not some fringe player holding on by threads. She's a former top 4 in the world. She has competed on Wimbledon's center court. She has beaten the best players alive on stages that actually matter, and her comeback from injury has been one of the more quietly compelling stories on tour over the last couple of seasons. The kind of story that doesn't get enough credit because it doesn't arrive wrapped in a flashy narrative or a perfectly packaged moment. It comes in the form of early morning practice sessions, in ranking points earned one brutal match at a time, and in the slow, unglamorous process of rebuilding trust in a body that once let her down completely. So when someone with that resume looks at a draw and sees a player with a fraction of her experience stepping in ahead of her, the disbelief is completely warranted. It's not petty. It's not bitterness. It's the entirely natural reaction of someone who has spent years operating on a belief that results determine everything, suddenly discovering that belief has conditions attached to it that nobody told her about. And that tension right there, that collision between two completely different ideas of what a sport owes the people who dedicate their lives to it, is the real story underneath all of this. Because tennis right now is being pulled in two directions at the same time. On one side, there's the meritocracy that has always defined the sport. Rankings, results, and points accumulated across hundreds of matches on every surface, in every condition, through every slump and comeback imaginable. You earn your spot. That's always been the deal, and it's a deal that has given the sport its integrity for decades. On the other side, there's a sport that has grown into something much larger than an athletic competition. Grand Slams are global entertainment events now. They need players who carry narratives, who open doors to audiences that never cared about tennis before, who make someone on the other side of the world suddenly feel like this is their sport too. And Alex does that in a way that barely a handful of players on the entire tour can match. To millions of people across the Philippines and Southeast Asia, she isn't just a tennis player. She is the tennis player. The first Filipino player to win a Grand Slam match, which she did at the US Open, carries a weight that no ranking spreadsheet will ever fully capture. When she walks onto a court, she walks with an entire nation behind her, and that nation follows her everywhere with a loyalty that tournament organizers have genuinely never encountered at this scale before. People who understand what it means to exist beyond sport have taken notice. When someone like Maria Sharapova, a player who built an entire second chapter of her public life on the power of global appeal and personal narrative, looks at Alex and recognizes something rare in her, that observation carries real weight. Sharapova didn't become iconic purely because she won. She became iconic because she understood how to be a story people followed whether they were watching tennis or not. And she sees that same quality in Alex. So when you frame it that way, Roland Garros's decision starts looking less like a controversial gamble and more like an organization that is simply reading the moment correctly. They're not just filling a slot in a bracket. They're investing in a story that could bring Paris clay to millions of people who have never once sat down to watch a baseline rally in their lives. But logic doesn't make it painless for the players caught in its wake, and the Badosa dimension might end up being the most fascinating subplot of the entire tournament, because experienced competitors know something the rest of us tend to forget. Being overlooked is fuel. Feeling like the sport has drifted towards someone younger without your permission, like the spotlight moved while you were busy doing the unglamorous work of earning it back, does something to a real competitor that no training block can manufacture. It lights a fire that takes a very long time to go out. Badosa has survived worse than a controversial draw decision. She rebuilt from physical rock bottom. She developed a mental durability that most athletes never have to find because they're never pushed that far. And now she has something sitting right in front of her that has nothing to do with fitness or tactics. She has something to prove to the sport, to the committee, and to herself. That is a dangerous combination for whoever ends up across the net from her in Paris. Meanwhile, Alex arrives at Roland Garros carrying something equally powerful but pointing in an entirely different direction. Momentum. The kind that builds when results start catching up to the hype, when the skeptics run low on ammunition, and when opponents start approaching you with a different kind of respect because they've seen the film and they know you can actually hurt them. But clay is a completely different conversation, and that's the part of this story that deserves more honest attention. Clay is unforgiving in ways that hard courts simply aren't. Points stretch longer. Errors compound. The surface punishes players who force things, who lean on pace instead of precision, who swing without the patience that only repetition builds, and it has humbled players far more experienced than Alex during their first serious runs at Roland Garros. Her preparation this swing has reportedly focused on exactly those demands: movement, building longer points, and learning to compete in rallies that stretch beyond anything she typically encounters on faster surfaces. That adjustment process involves losses before it sticks. She's picked up clay wins this season, and that matters, but there's a meaningful gap between winning matches on clay and thriving across 2 full weeks where opponents arrive having studied every pattern you own, where your own tendencies become predictable, where the physical toll compounds relentlessly with each passing round. The question at this point isn't whether she belongs, because the entry list already settled that conversation. The question is how deep she goes when the weight of expectation fully lands, when the crowd that feeds her energy becomes pressure she has to actively manage, and when every opponent is motivated by the singular goal of being the one who ends the story, because that's exactly what happens the moment you're inside the main draw at Roland Garros. You stop being the underdog the crowd is rooting for. You become the player everyone wants to beat, and navigating that psychological shift is one of the hardest things any young athlete has to learn, and it cannot be taught in advance. It can only be lived through. One more thing that's worth sitting with before Paris begins. Alex's inconsistency this season is not a flaw in her story. It might actually be the best part of it. There have been matches where her level dropped visibly. Moments where inexperience showed more than her supporters would have liked. Stretches where the gap between her best tennis and her average tennis was wider than comfortable. But none of that has dimmed the interest surrounding her. If anything, it's done the opposite, because fans don't connect with perfection. They never have. They connect with process, with the genuine uncertainty of watching someone figure it out in real time, sometimes getting it spectacularly right, sometimes coming up short in ways that clearly sting and linger. Alex gives people that. She isn't a finished product being unveiled. She's a work in progress being followed, and there is a profound difference in how those two things feel to watch over the course of a tournament. The Paris crowd is going to be its own subplot entirely. Roland Garros audiences are passionate, deeply knowledgeable, and completely unpredictable. They have been known to adopt players who capture something in them, to carry those players through matches on sheer collective noise, and to shift the momentum of entire sets through will alone. If the Filipino fans travel to Paris in the numbers they've shown up everywhere else this season, and there is every reason to believe they will, Alex's matches are going to feel unlike anything else on that schedule. That environment can push a player past what their ranking or results would project as possible. It can also become overwhelming if the moment grows larger than the match itself, and learning to draw from that kind of energy without drowning in it is a skill that only comes from being inside it, repeatedly, until the noise becomes something you can actually use. She's getting that education right now in the biggest classroom the sport has to offer. So here's where all of it lands. This is not a story about a ranking anomaly or a draw committee making a call that people are going to argue about until the clay dries. It's a story about two completely different versions of what tennis actually values and what it owes the people who pour everything they have into it. Badosa represents the traditional path, the grind, the unshakable belief that results should speak loudest, that work should always outrank narrative, that the system exists to protect exactly the kind of investment she has made. Alex represents something the sport is still actively learning how to measure, an impact that doesn't fit inside a spreadsheet but is absolutely real and absolutely reshaping what it means to matter in this game. The clay courts of Paris have hosted some of the most defining chapters in the history of this sport. Championships decided on margins so thin they still get debated. Careers that launched under those lights and legacies that hardened into something permanent beneath those shadows. And underneath all of that history, the sport keeps moving forward, slowly, then suddenly, then in ways nobody fully predicted. What it looks like when it moves forward around a 20-year-old from the Philippines with an entire nation tracking her every match, her every swing, her every stumble, is something we are genuinely about to find out. The draw is set. The courts are ready. And whatever happens over those 2 weeks in Paris is going to say something that matters, not just about Alex, not just about Badosa, but about what tennis is actually becoming and who gets to help write what it looks like next.